Folks, we have promised, of course, more in-depth dialogue over the situation in Venezuela. This coming as just today, we did see Nicolas Maduro and his wife in court. Essentially, we heard them plead not guilty for narco-terrorism charges, among other charges. We heard Maduro say he was essentially kidnapped, and also calling himself the president, saying, "I am still the president." Meantime, there's a lot of dialogue, not only within the nation, but on an international level, about what transpired over the weekend with the capture of the leader of Venezuela and his wife, and probably a good time to get some folks a little bit more background and context into the situation. So with that, we want to speak with Greg Weeks, who is the Associate Dean of the College of Humanities and Earth and Social Sciences over at UNC Charlotte. Greg, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Impact.
Thank you.
Well, we understand that you have a particular focus on the Latin American realm, specifically also looking at politics and, use of military and authoritarian types of, government structures that we've seen in Latin America. What can you tell folks about the background of the situation in Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro? Tell us about his history, I guess, so folks can have a better understanding of what led us up to this past weekend.
So Maduro took power after Hugo Chavez died about a dozen years ago. And over time, his presidency has become increasingly authoritarian, so cracking down very hard on anyone who protests against the government, stealing elections. The last presidential election was very clearly stolen. And basically attacking anyone who doesn't support the government. So politically, Venezuela has been a dictatorship without rule of law for quite some time.
Now, I mean, we've seen, I guess you would call, we call it like a disparity of reactions, where we see folks who are either Venezuelan or have Venezuela ties. We've seen some of those folks celebrating in the wake of this capture. We've seen other folks of various backgrounds raising alarms, either over the potential impacts this could have on international relations or what sort of impacts this could have on the U.S. by making this decision. What do you think you're seeing as far as the big, reactions and sentiments from? And I know it's tough because there's a wide variety, but what are kind of like the main sentiments you're seeing from folks out there in response to what happened this past weekend?
Well, I think nobody is sorry that Maduro is gone, or very, very few. He is not a well-liked person. That said, the way in which it happened, which was that he was, forcibly removed from the country, has raised alarms regarding what kind of precedent that sets for, say, other countries. And some of the mixed reaction is also that he's gone, but the government, the regime that he was leading is still in place. So as vice president has taken over. And so it's not exactly clear, how much change and in what ways will Venezuela be able to sort of move forward politically and economically.
As far as the other international relations aspects of this situation, we know that there is a dynamic that also includes Russia and China. And in fact, the United Nations is kind of weighing in and looking at, the potential implications of the U.S. decision here. But we know that Russia and China are kind of watching as well. And what do you think their role would be, going forward? Whether it is just kind of a watch and see, or would there be any sort of action, or do you think this opens the door for Russia and China to do, XYZ that they've been wanting to do for a while, if anything?
Yes. So the question about how should great powers, say the U.S., Russia, China, be able to respond to what they think is a problem in their quote unquote neighborhood. So the area around that country. We know Russia invaded Ukraine, and China, obviously, with Taiwan, has its own very particular interests that the U.S. has opposed. Now the U.S. is saying, well, we get to do what we want in our area of the world, perhaps sending a signal that other countries can do the same in their area of the world. So that's something to be concerned about. Aside from that, China has very large investment in Venezuela, including debt that Venezuela has taken on. So it's very interested as well in, well, okay, well, how is the economy going to be run? Are the contracts going to be respected and that kind of thing? So geopolitically, it's quite important.
Now, I feel like another element that gets me really interested is just kind of the larger picture in where, you know, we talked about how specifically you have this focus in some regards to, with authoritarian types of regimes in various countries. And I just always get really curious about all of the factors that play into that. How do these countries arrive at these positions? And I think about, and this is a dynamic that some have posed in this Venezuela dialogue, the fact that, the U.S. has removed a leader, so there's something of a vacuum that could be there.
Yes.
Isn't that a factor into how some of these types of regimes get started to begin with?
So certainly that was the case. This is now over 25 years ago when this regime got going under its previous president. And it was quite popular to begin with. It was solving what many people thought of as serious problems of poverty in the country. Venezuela has a lot of oil, and the Hugo Chavez, who was before Maduro, used that oil to, essentially help subsidize all kinds of social services for people. Over time, that became unworkable. The Venezuelan oil industry wasn't invested in, oil prices dropped, and the regime became less popular. But when a government is unpopular, you have elections, and the elections can help people show that they're unhappy and change the government. And they wouldn't allow it because oftentimes once people are in power for many years, they don't want to let go. So yes, in a way, there was a power vacuum that was filled. And over time, the feelings toward that government soured and it wouldn't let go. And now it's a big question because the government isn't gone yet. The government's still there. There was an election in 2024, and the winner of that election is not being made president right now. The most popular opposition leader, President Trump, has said will not be taking over. So there's a lot of question about how that power vacuum is going to be filled now.
I feel like another conversation that I see out there right now, and I can understand how folks might want to try to grasp onto things that have happened in the past as sort of like, well, this is a precedent, or we've seen something similar like this happen before. And we've seen this comparison made between what happened in Panama in 1989 and, what just happened in Venezuela this past weekend. Do you see similarities and do you see differences? And are there any sort of other, historical events that have happened in, U.S. history that might say, well, we've seen something similar like this before, or is this completely unprecedented?
No, it's not unprecedented. I do think people refer to Panama, which has a lot of similarities in the sense that you had a president for Panama was Manuel Noriega, who was indicted, and the U.S. Invaded under the senior President Bush, grabbed him in a similar way to grabbing Maduro, and took him to arrested him, took him to the United States. The big difference there is that Panama is a very small country that has been deeply, deeply tied and dependent upon the United States for well over 100 years. So it was not a country that was hostile to the United States. It did not really have a revolution like Venezuela that was hostile to the United States. So that one was deemed a success. But the circumstances were quite a bit different. Interestingly, there too is that the one reason for invading Panama was to end the drug trade, and it didn't end the drug trade. The drug trade just kept going. It didn't matter who was in power; the drugs kept moving. If you want to go back, another very good example is Cuba, in 1901, the U.S. Created what's called the Platt Amendment and took over Cuba, allowed Cubans to have presidents, their own presidents, as long as they accepted U.S. demands. And if they did not accept U.S. demands, then that president would be removed. And the U.S. occupied Cuba for several decades with U.S. troops to enforce that. So there are definitely precedents, but it's going to be interesting to see how much they follow those examples, because Venezuela is very different from Cuba or Panama.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, we're just pretty new in this specific situation with Venezuela, with this latest development that just happened over the weekend. So there's yet to, be all sorts of things that play out, as far as, consequences of that and what happens. But we're also seeing the president now talking about, threats against now Colombia and Mexico, talking about Greenland, predicting Cuba's regime would fall. I mean, if we were to see that come to fruition, would all of that as one big package of all these countries now, would that be unprecedented at that point?
That would be unprecedented, yes.
Yeah.
It would be extraordinarily difficult. But yes, that would mark a pretty significant expansion that we have not really always seen in the history of U.S. Latin American relations.
Now, as somebody who has obviously put a lot of academic focus into this sphere of the world, and also, the politics and the history of Latin America, and clearly has an interest, I'm curious to get inside your mind of what exactly are you looking for, coming up here, things that you're watching to see, how will things play out? Are there things that you would be talking to your students, let's say, about, like, this is what I would urge you to keep an eye out for? Or, I guess, what sort of storylines or developments might you be curious to see or watch for going forward?
So what I would look for is what is the role of U.S. civilians and or soldiers in Venezuela in the coming days? Because all the examples we've been talking about, U.S. interventions, Cuba, Panama, elsewhere, involve heavy use of U.S. troops, including occupying troops. Now, the president has said that there are no U.S. troops currently in Venezuela. The country is not being occupied. So how can the U.S. enforce its will, as the Secretary of State and the president both have said it will? How can it do that when it is not in the country? And so that's going to be the issue that I'm very interested in, because they've said that the new president is kind of under watch. Well, how will that be done if the U.S. does not have personnel in the country actually enforcing it? So that, I think, is the most interesting thing, is that it's essentially trying to rule the country by remote control. And doing that also is unprecedented, because this has always involved U.S. troops to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting point that you bring up, in that I feel like when you hear international relations discussed, a lot of times it comes down to, when it is trying to impose your will or get what you want out of a certain relationship, it's either, the sticks or the carrot situation, where there's like a reward or there's like some sort of punishment. But yeah, if the military isn't on the ground there, from the U.S., then what sort of carrot and stick would remain to be used in this relationship?
Right, because the stick essentially is, we're going to grab you out of the country like we did Maduro. In my opinion, that gets hard to do over and over. But as of yet, that's the force, that's the stick that the U.S. has offered. And so is that a stick that can last? Is that a stick that can work in country after country? I don't know, but I'll certainly be looking at that.
Yeah, really interesting conversation. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you think is important before we wrap things up here?
No, I mean, I think in general, it's interesting also to look at, how is this going to play out in U.S. courts? What is the evidence against Maduro, and how does that translate to a country like Colombia or Cuba, where you don't have this heads of state indicted in the same way? So, looking at the example of Maduro can help instruct us too, is that how could this be applied to other presidents that President Trump has mentioned, and it's not always clear.
Yeah. Really, really interesting for sure. Greg Weeks, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We hope you come back soon here on Live Impact, especially as we probably have more developments coming in the coming days and weeks.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right. Take care. All right, folks, probably a good time to take a break here. Be assured that we will continue to keep you updated on the very latest with the situation in Venezuela. As we mentioned, there was a court appearance today for Nicolas Maduro and his wife, and there's also a dialogue that's underway regarding the United Nations front. So we're going to keep an eye on things, and as new information comes into the newsroom, we'll definitely be presenting that to you. We'll take that break we mentioned. We'll be back in 2 minutes, a couple other topics to talk about, including back here at home, safety. That's always a big thing. There was a big discussion that happened today in the city of Charlotte regarding that, so we want to make sure that we touch on that for you. But we'll be back in 2.